on the desktop. Here we go. So I changed the talk of my title a little bit because interesting things, interesting problems at VistaWiki, you may or may not find them interesting. So I didn't want to be presumptuous and say these are interesting things. So we'll start with introductions. We went around and introduced ourselves, but my name's Daniel Renfro. I've been working with MediaWiki for quite a while in various, came from academia and now I'm in the printing industry. Work at Vistaprint, which is a large, well, I guess not like Department of Transportation or Energy or NASA large, but like a fairly large global printing company. Got about 10,000 employees worldwide, bunch of offices. Yep, a little bit about me. So we have one global enterprise documentation system called VistaWiki, very imaginatively named, for Vistaprint, the company. A little bit of statistics. This month, we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary. And so my job when I get home is to figure out, like, to buy birthday cakes or do something, I don't know. Gotta do something big. I have about 8,000 readers. Some of the people on the shop floor, the manufacturing people, don't need to necessarily see the things, and some of the employees in the call centers, our customer support, have their own documentation system that's much smaller, so they don't read things. We have about special statistics said 1,000 active contributors, which is just people who've edited in the last 30 days. So that number is actually a lot higher. Not everyone always edits a lot. And we've got about 250,000 topics, 2.5 million edits, which puts us somewhere in between the Turkish and the Esperanto wikis if we were a Wikipedia. So it's like in the huge long list, we're not at English or Spanish or German, but we're not at like Tulu or Adage or any of the like esoteric languages. That being said, unlike these Wikipedias, our editor to reader ratio is a lot higher. We have about half as many people edit the wiki as read it, so one out of two people. It's quite high. I like to boast that most of our readers are encouraged, and we encourage them to edit, to be bold. Somebody said that. We use that all the time. And whenever you put that in an email, you have to like bold it and make it really, really huge. Probably like most everyone here, our MediaWiki installation has a number of extensions. I think we have like 100. I've been trying to pare these down to just the useful ones. Some of which we've had a lot of success writing custom extensions over the years. And I think it's worth sharing some of the successes we've had with these. A lot of the times enterprises have the share drives, the networked file systems that are just the Wild West of documents. So in order to kind of curb this and at least get a handle on things, we created a parser tag called a share tag, where if you insert a UNC path or a DFS path, it just creates a link within the documentation that people can click and download a file. So if you've got files on the share drive, instead of emailing them to each other, why don't you create a wiki page, talk about that file, and provide a link to download it. Going the other way, we've written and kind of adapted some converters from at least Excel and Word. I tried PowerPoint, but that was a whole nother problem, to convert them into wiki text. So we try and tell people, don't email Excel documents to each other. Stop emailing, Word documents. Why don't you run this through the converter and put it in a page and then let everybody communally edit this, right? The actions of many are better than actions of few. More eyes are better than none, right? If you do have an Excel spreadsheet that has logic in it, well, I read somewhere recently that like 50% of all business logic is contained in Excel spreadsheets. It's like, oh God. I hope that's not true at Vistaprint. I don't know. So we wrote an Excel embedder for the wiki page. So if you give it a path to the share drives, it will create a read-only view of your Excel document in the page. So if you've got graphs, dynamic queries to other databases, things like that, you can just embed it right in the wiki. We hooked it up to, we have an extension to hook up and query various SQL databases. It's abstracted away, so we have MySQL, SQL Server, Redshift, which is like Amazon's thing, anyone, not just administrators in VistaWiki, can write SQL queries and query data and get reports, either in bulleted list or tabular. This is nice for auto-generating documentation. People kind of abuse this and make all kinds of crazy, horrific things. But for example, Vistaprint is a global company. We accept all kinds of currencies from everywhere. Why maintain a bulleted list of currencies by hand when you can just do one select and get the list from the currency table in the such and such production database? And integration with Active Directory, various other things. We have a personnel directory, which drives a lot of the usage of our wiki. Who knows, what's so-and-so's extension? The people directory, we call it the people directory, just gets people using the wiki. That's usually their first thing. Your first day as an employee, you sit down and you're like, who's my boss? What's their email? Who do I need to contact? And from there, we try and tell people, well, why don't you go to their page and leave them a welcome message, things like this. All of these were problems that we encountered over the years and tried to solve with software solutions. We try and not build a lot of software on the if you build it they will come model, because then you end up with just maintaining a lot of software that's not really useful. We try and define a business problem and then write software specifically for that thing. That being said, there are some things that we have not yet written that we haven't solved appropriately with just software. The company went through a reorganization. You all may be familiar with how Google created a parent company, Alphabet, and became a subsidiary, right? Vistaprint did the same thing a few years back. Simpress, which no one knows, it just existed on paper, some years ago, became the holding company for another of these things. And during this reorganization, it offered me the opportunity to there was a drop in software development, and everyone was doing their documentation. It offered me the opportunity to go through the backlog of tickets, of emails, of conversations I've had over the cue balls, and see what types of problems people have that we hadn't already solved with software. I came up with two big groups, and I don't really have good names for these, so I'll just tell you what people always email. And the first one is I want my own space. MITRE has created a number of different wikis. I've heard this a number of times that administrators here have created a bunch of maybe context-sensitive, context-specific, right, domain-specific wikis. So we avoided that for better or worse. Instead of doing the wiki farm, we just have one huge MediaWiki instance. And so problems arise over 10 years of this, like searching. When you want to search for your stuff across all these articles, and the language in the printing business is kind of all the same, how do you find what you need? Common complaint is I need to be able to, I want to look at my documentation from a high level and just see what it looks like. How can I organize all my team's stuff effectively, right? This is kind of, Confluence has the idea of spaces. If anyone's used Confluence, it's kind of like a section of the wiki that's only yours. I'm not exactly sure how they've done this. People have gotten around this problem by doing weird things in our wiki, like prefixing their titles with their team's name. Web development, I don't know, CSS, or web development, PHP development, which is great for that team or the person creating the documentation, but horrible when you're actually trying to link to that page, because I don't know what your team has done to title their articles. This also tends to pollute the search results. People can't find what they want, so they invent tricks that exacerbate the problem. Oh, I should say, on my note cards it says, mention people going off wiki. It's always the horrible thing. It's like if they can't get what they want from VistaWiki, they're going someplace else. We don't have a large enterprise search system. And so we do have a search engine that searches the people directory, the wiki, our corporate blog and stuff. But if somebody's using a Confluence or a wiki web from years ago, right, somewhere else on the internet, we don't know about it and no one can find their documentation. Let's see, what's my own? Nope, don't look at that one yet. I thought I had more on this slide. The solutions so far for helping people organize their documentation have been, we upgraded our search engine to Cirrus Search from the old Lucene one, and tweaked some of the settings to take advantage of our established, or the established article structure. So in our rollout and in our training, we tell everybody, all you need is an explanatory sentence, a very short sentence, one heading, and some categories. Just put that in there. We upweight any text that comes before the first heading, because that should be a general topic for anyone to know about your thing. If you've got some esoteric documentation, you should have an introductory sentence that says, kind of help orient people. That tends to help with search results. We use categories extensively, along with the dynamic page list extension to generate kind of dashboards for various team leads or whoever wants to view their documentation. If you're not familiar with dynamic page list, it's essentially a parser tag, or parser tag, where you can easily write a query for Wiki and generate results. In the back end, it creates a SQL query. This is great, except you can't always search recursively through the category hierarchy. The category tree is not really a tree, it's a directed acyclic graph. And so walking this graph, you get in cyclic things, you get in all kinds of weird things. So probably all the people who are doing semantic MediaWiki are laughing at me, because we never adopted this years ago. And I'm wondering if we should have, and going like, oh man, this might actually solve our problem. But for better or worse, we use categories and DPL. The other way to organize documentation, you would be asking yourself, why not use namespaces? You could just create a namespace for every team, right? Except that we tried this a few times, and namespaces don't go away in MediaWiki. Once you have a namespace, it exists in the database, and you can rename it. You can put deprecated in all caps at the beginning, but it doesn't work, and it's exacerbated by the next problem, which is the information turnover. I think this is probably specific to private wikis, to enterprise wikis. It doesn't happen on Wikipedia. On Wikipedia, the article for mammal will never get renamed. I mean, mammals are going to be mammals, dogs are dogs. But in private wikis, information, the truth changes sometimes. Yeah, so I've got some examples. Vistaprint's quite dynamic company. A lot of software development goes on. We have ephemeral software development teams that come together, work on a project, and create some documentation and then disperse. And so things get outdated quickly. People are coming to the company and leaving the company. They're changing job roles. This probably sounds familiar to everybody here. Not only that, nomenclature changes over time. We recently had a project to do stitching. This may be like private information to our company, but I could probably share this, that we acquired company to do embroidery. And so there was kind of all these experimental things on, oh, well, how can we market an embroidery thing to people all over the world? And all this documentation about needles, thread, how to render it. You know, if somebody uploads a design to our website, how do you render this in real time so that they can preview what they want? All this documentation was created. And then the marketers got their hands on this stuff and said, oh, we're going to change all the names of this stuff from stitching and embroidery to things like, I don't know, pullovers. If you want a pullover for your dog, right, with your dog's name embroidered on it, we could probably sell that. Vistaprint sells all kinds of stuff. And so now instead of embroidery, people are referring to it as like puppy pullovers or some esoteric thing, and no one can find anything because everyone's searching for the wrong thing. I mentioned the reorganization. We tried to get ahead of the problem by creating a template for the company name, because we thought if we get acquired by Google or Amazon or something, great, we'll just change the name in one place, the company name in one place, and Vistaprint will now be, I don't know, Amazon printing department or something. Except that there was a nonlinear reorganization to the company, and all of the documentation for our parent company and Vistaprint kind of had to be pulled apart manually, right? Like there was no mathematical function where you could give it a page and say, yes, this is for Simpress, or yes, this is for Vistaprint. It's just a lot of manual upkeep. Speaking of software solutions, we tried to address this using kind of this tripartite model. and created three custom extensions, which are going to sound familiar. These topics have come up already. One is the archive extension. I think, did you talk about this? Somebody asked for an extension to archive stuff. So how to handle outdated topics. The archive extension is simply a wrapper around move or rename. People had a real hard time grasping the idea of deletion, even though deletion is not really permanent in MediaWiki. I mean, maybe not the average editor has resurrect privileges, but things can be resurrected, pages. So we renamed this, we reframed this as archives. There's an archive namespace where you just click the archive tab at the top of the thing, the page gets moved into the archive namespace, gets removed from the, I think that namespace isn't searched by default, and it's out of sight, out of mind. If you want to do some documentation archaeology and go search the archives, it's perfectly fine. You just have to go do that in the search engine yourself. So this helps if you've got some documentation that's just out of date. Instead of clicking delete and going like, oh, we may need this sometime in the future, people really like just being like, okay, I can just put it out of sight, out of mind. To help with the human part, we created the curation extension, which is kind of like watchers on steroids. If you're a curator, you're also a watcher, but you're also it's like a watcher with a face. You have signed up to say, I know something about this topic, you can contact me in the future about this, and I'm somewhat responsible for keeping this article up to date. Maybe not all the time, but it's kind of hard in Vistaprint and VistaWiki to figure out who knows about what topic, like embroidery. You can go view the edit history. I'm out of time. Okay, fine. Okay, 2 minutes, right. So you can go find the curators of this article. Building on that is certification, which is kind of like flagged revisions into the future. We don't want to stop people from editing, but only one person can certify that an article is correct. If it gets edited, they get notified, the certification goes away, and they can go back and say, is this edit correct or not? So instead of approving edits that happened, we kind of just let people edit and approve it after the fact. We found that was better. No one's really editing HR documentation except for the HR people, things like that. So we made some headway on these two topics, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and input about how you've handled these situations, or if you've got any better solutions. Can we take questions? We do one, two? Yeah, Mark?
I just want to know if you're going to open source any of those Word-like extensions?
Yes. So at one point, we open sourced one very simple extension to alphabetically sort categories at the bottom of the article. That was kind of our proof of concept. It was my initiative, and it got put by the wayside. It got reprioritized lower. And so since I'm the main developer, it's like, I don't know if I really want my code out there for everyone looking at. We have to clean it up, make some security things. But yes, the plan has always been to open source these things.
How often can I harass you about that?
I think the more the better, because then I can go to my superiors and say, look, this is more widely applicable, and it makes Vistaprint look good. Yeah. Cool.
Yes. How did you implement a phone book within the wiki?
So we have an offline job that connects via LDAP protocol to Active Directory. Just pulls down data into a local table. We just created a table in the MediaWiki database called employee, and it caches some subset of the fields in Active Directory. Then there's a custom extension that just displays that thing, and you can query it in some subset of ways. First name, last name, cube number, office, things like this. So is that?
Thank you.
Yep, certainly. Cool, and feel free to chat me up about anything. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just real interested in the curation and certification concepts too. We do similar things at NASA, and so if we can find a way to collaborate on that kind of thing, it would be really great.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. Find me afterwards.